Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Era. All right. So I'll start with the housekeeping items before we actually launch the workshop. My name is Bethany Principe, and I work with the County of San Diego Department of Parks and Rec. And Era, go back. Thank you. Before the workshop actually starts, we do want to go over some of our Zoom housekeeping items to make sure that all issues are addressed. So based on our webinar platform, all participants are muted and don't have access to their cameras. However, we do want to hear from you. We want to hear your questions and comments. And so if you can, please use your Q&A icon on your toolbar, or the raise hand icon on your toolbar. The chat function is not active right now, so type in your questions or comments on the Q&A or raise your hand and we will unmute you. However, we are not going to be answering any questions or comments until the end of the workshop after all the presentations are completed. So we appreciate your patience, but you might want to hold off on raising your hand until the very end during the actual question and answer session. But feel free to put your typed questions or answers, questions or comments into the Q&A function. If you do experience any technical issues during the meeting, feel free to call in using the phone number on the screen and the webinar ID. We also have the phone number and webinar ID on the DPR Public Meetings webpage where you found the Zoom link. We will also be recording, or we actually are recording this presentation. It will be uploaded to our DPR Public Meetings webpage and posted within a few days. So we are now going to kick the meeting off, and I'm going to turn the presentation over to Deb Mosley, who is our Chief of the Resource Management Division at Department of Parks and Rec. Era, you can advance to the next screen.
Thank you, Beth, and welcome everybody. I'm really excited that you all took some time today to come together. I know once again, we're doing this in a virtual platform, and maybe one year, next year, hopefully we will actually be out in a preserve where we can do this together out in the open in one of our beautiful preserves that is part of our multiple species conservation program. But in the meantime, we are still virtual. I do see that we have a lot of participants, at least over 80 members of the public plus our panelists. So really appreciate everyone's time, and that number keeps going up. So it looks like we have people continuing to join us. So thank you. I want to thank all of our partners. This MSCP program, which we are, and Beth, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're celebrating our 23rd year of 50 years. And this has been a true partnership, and you're going to see multiple presentations from all of our partners that have worked together to make this successful, including the City of San Diego, City of Chula Vista, SANDAG, our wildlife agencies, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and United States Fish and Wildlife Service. So we're really thankful, and all the other many partners that I'm not even acknowledging, a lot of the nonprofits and conservancies and other partners that are part of this important program. So I think I don't want to go too much into the details because I know Beth is going to go into what the county has been working on in this past year, but I'll just highlight a few critical things that I think for me really stood out as unique for this year. As you know, we've had a unique year with the pandemic. And so it was interesting to really see how people reacted to that in terms of conservation. I feel, and what we've seen here at County Parks and Recreation, this reinvigoration in conservation and preservation from many people of the public getting much more involved than they had in the past. And that's evident in their use of our educational programs that we had to convert to online, and our social programs and social media online. We actually saw a huge increase in activity and a lot more interest in nature. And it's helped us adapt how we do some of our educational programs. And I think people really realized they needed that nature component to help offset some of the, stress and frustrations that were going on with the pandemic. So, I think that is going to have a long-lasting positive effect where we can really use this to build the next generation of environmental stewards. The other thing that I think is all the partners are really focusing on is the monitoring and preserve assessment aspect. As we're about halfway through this was really what our goal was, is to really start focusing on, we've bought a lot of land and we need to keep buying land, but how is the preserve doing, and is it thriving, and what do we need to do? What restoration is needed? What areas of land needs to be bought, and how can we really ensure that the species and habitat are thriving? And we do that through a monitoring program, both within our lands and regionally. And those regional monitoring programs are very important and critical. So with that said, I am going to hand it off to Beth. I really am appreciative of her efforts to lead this, since the county is hosting this year. And Beth has done a fantastic job, I think, working with all the partners to get this going, and the rest of the county team. But also, again, I can't say thank you enough to all of our partners and the members of the public who are listening. And please come out and continue to help support our MSCP program. With that said, I will hand it off to Beth.
Thank you, Deb. You can go to the next slide, Era. So my name is Bethany Principe, and I am a land use environmental planner for the County of San Diego Department of Parks and Rec. And today I'll be presenting on the Multiple Species Conservation Program South County Sub-Area Plan 2020 Annual Report, which is, as Deb said, our 23rd annual report. The reporting period for the annual report is January 1st through December 31st, 2020. Next slide, please. The MSCP is a long-term regional habitat conservation program focused on balancing the protection of plant and animal species and the demand for housing, non-residential development, recreation, and agriculture. In the early 1990s, the county partnered with 11 jurisdictions to develop the MSCP, which ensures compliance with the state and federal Endangered Species Acts and the State Natural Community Conservation Planning Act. The MSCP encompasses 3 sub-area plans for the county and cities of Chula Vista and San Diego. The county's South County Sub-Area Plan, which will be referred to as the South County Plan in this presentation, was adopted by the County Board of Supervisors in 1997 and covers the unincorporated areas of the southwestern portion of the county. The United States Fish and Wildlife Service and California Department of Fish and Wildlife issued the MSCP permit approval to the county in 1998 and is a 50-year permit. This is the county's only adopted MSCP plan. Next slide, please. In addition to the adopted South County plan highlighted in purple on the map, the county has 2 additional MSCP plan areas within the county. The green portion is the draft North County plan area, and the yellow portion is the future East County plan area. DPR's overall MSCP program focuses efforts to acquire, manage, and monitor preserve lands in all 3 of these plan areas. As of December 31st, 2020, DPR owns a total of 42,300 acres of preserve lands. But this does not include additional park and lands and facilities that are owned or managed by DPR, which combines to a total of 56,000 acres. Next slide, please. As of December 31st, 2020, the county has acquired 23,300 acres in all 3 MSCP plan areas since 1998. And over the last 23 years, $213 million have been spent on acquisitions in all 3 plan areas to create or expand 40 county preserves. Of the 213 million, the county has spent 118 million, and an additional 95 million has come from partnering entities and grants. Next slide, please. The goal of the South County Plan is to assemble a 98,379 acre preserve that supports the 85 plant and animal species covered by the MSCP. As of December 31st, 2020, the South County Plan preserve totaled 79,853 acres, or 81% of this preserve goal. The acreage includes over 13,000 acres of county preserve lands. A total of 655 acres of habitat were added to the South County Plan Preserve in 2020 through private and public acquisitions. The county's acquisitions added to the Ramona Grasslands, Dictionary Hill, and Sycamore Canyon and Gooden Ranch preserves. Next slide, please. DPR preserve lands management and monitoring actions are documented in preserve-specific resource management plans. And these RMPs identify specific actions needed for habitat types and species found on site. Management actions include land stewardship activities such as vegetation management, access control, ranger patrols, trash removal, and trail maintenance. Additional larger scale habitat management and restoration efforts occur as needed. DPR's monitoring program has many facets that provide data about the preserve's functionality. And our data comes from a variety of sources, including our baseline inventory surveys, which are conducted on new acquisitions and helps us understand what plants, animals, and cultural resources are found on site. We also have the implementation of the county's targeted monitoring program, which includes monitoring for specific plant and animal species and habitat types. Next slide, please. In 2020, the county implemented 6 restoration projects using $2.5 million in grant funding. The 6 restoration projects occurred on 4 county preserves and included non-native invasive plant species removal, habitat restoration, and invasive animal species eradication. These restoration projects benefited a variety of MSCP covered species, including leaf-spells vireo, coastal California gnatcatcher, coastal cactus wren, northern harrier, Cooper's hawk, and Belding's orange-throated whiptail. Next slide, please. DPR also implements the tree planting program as part of the management and monitoring efforts on DPR preserve lands. Dead and dying trees are replaced with native tree species at a 1-to-3 ratio, with 1 tree removed and 3 trees planted. The comprehensive tree planting program was actually formalized in 2016, and by the end of 2020, approximately 23,000 trees have been planted. In 2020 alone, over 4,500 trees were planted, with the goal of at least 3,500 trees to be planted in the next reporting year. Next slide, please. Part of the tree planting program that DPR is very proud of is our tree plotter inventory web application. Now, our efforts with the tree plotter actually started in April of 2021, so information won't be found in the 2020 annual report, but we will be talking about it in the 2021 annual report. However, we did want to give you a sneak peek of what we've been doing and how this program actually assists us in our management and monitoring efforts. This program is amazing, and not only allows us to track how many trees are planted, how many trees are existing on the properties, but where the trees are located, the species, their health indicators, any associated photographs of the trees, and any other measurements that we take are entered into this database. The goal of the program is actually to create a complete inventory of all trees located on all DPR properties. This tool will help DPR to actually keep track of the trees and chart their health and distribution, and allow for any adaptive management strategies that need to be implemented if we if we find out that the trees are not thriving. You can see on the slide the 1,056 trees that were mapped at Dos Picos Park, and a couple of examples of the reports that can be generated using this database. And the best part about this database is that the public can access it. So if you look at you can access it via the link on the slide, and the link will also be entered into the chat. Next slide, please. DPR has successfully implemented the South County Plan for the last 23 years. And as stated earlier, since 1998, 40 county parks and preserves have either been created or expanded through the MSCP funded preserve assemblage. On the DPR parks that were created after, on the preserve lands that were created after 1998, 19 MSCP covered species have been conserved that were not previously found on any other county park or preserve. One such species and acquisition is Encinitas baccharis at Del Dios Highlands Preserve in Escondido. Encinitas baccharis is a federally threatened and state endangered species. This medium-sized shrub is naturally found only in San Diego County. By purchasing this preserve, which was assembled between 2002 and 2010, the county has ensured that this population of Encinitas baccharis is protected in perpetuity. Next slide, please. Since 2010, DPR has received 2 grants to restore 7 acres of coastal cactus wren and 2 acres of Hermes copper butterfly habitat at Lakeside Linkage Preserve in Lakeside. The restoration project includes invasive non-native plant species treatment and removal, and native plant species plantings. The initial restoration phase was completed in 2019. And since then, cactus wren have been observed foraging and nesting in the actual restoration project site. DPR is continuing our restoration efforts with a second grant to benefit, to actually expand the original restoration site and help further protect the species. Next slide, please. We also wanted to talk about an upcoming restoration project that we are very excited about. A Wildlife Conservation Board grant was awarded to DPR in 2021, and work was implemented earlier this month. This 30-month project will restore Diegan coastal sage scrub habitat on Dictionary Hill Preserve in Spring Valley. Coastal California gnatcatcher, Kino checker spot butterfly, and monarch butterfly, among other species, will benefit from the project as non-native invasive plants species are treated and removed, and native plant species are installed. Next slide, please. Education outreach goes hand in hand with our management of preserve lands and is a priority for DPR. Annually, DPR's education efforts help thousands of San Diego visitors and residents connect with nature through a wide variety of programs. One such example is the Track Trails Adventures, which saw a 230% increase in participation from 2019 to 2020. And this program's adventures include scavenger hunt-like programs that educate, entertain, and reward kids for learning about nature at 7 county parks. DPR's environmental education programs were impacted, as almost everything else was, by COVID-19. However, these new challenges offered opportunities for DPR to expand our education outreach to virtual platforms. In 2020, virtual programs included Hawktober 2020, the Virtual Recreation Center, which is a one-stop shop for educational videos, online events, and activities. And we also had our virtual ranger-led hikes and preserve tours that were created to bring the outside inside. Next slide, please. Social media is a powerful tool that DPR utilizes to inform San Diego County residents and visitors of what's occurring on our DPR preserve lands. A quick look at the social media platforms used by DPR include Facebook and its 11 DPR associated pages, which cumulatively have 65,000 volunteers. The main DPR Facebook page is ranked number 4 in the state against other California state counties. Our Twitter feed is ranked number 2 and only follows behind San Francisco's Twitter feed, which covers both the city and county in San Francisco. The DPR Instagram account started in January 2020, and its following is growing. Our e-blast distribution list has 22,000 volunteers, and our DPR website receives 75,000 visitors every month from 65,000 unique individuals. Next slide, please. The county's MSCP implementation efforts also include private mitigation lands and development permits. Since 1998, the county has processed over 4,000 development permits, and this includes 128 single-family residential projects and 4 commercial projects that were permitted by the county in 2020. To date, 6,709 acres have been preserved as a condition of private development projects or through hardline agreements. In 2020, 421 acres of private mitigation lands were preserved, including 414 acres in the Otay Preserve Owner-Manager, otherwise known as Otay Palm, which is the mitigation land jointly owned by the city of Chula Vista and the county. Next slide, please. The county's Department of Planning and Development Services also oversees the management of 36 private RMPs countywide, with 2 new RMPs added in 2020. 1 RMP was added in the South County Plan area and 1 in the draft North County Plan area. In 2020, private RMP's annual reports documented the occurrences of 26 unique MSCP covered species in the South County Plan. Next slide, please. So thank you very much, and that concludes the county's presentation for the workshop, and I will now turn it over to Mark at the City of San Diego.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Bethany, for that awesome presentation, and thanks to everybody for showing up today. It's really great to see all the folks, here and there attached to this the Zoom meeting. So thanks again for hosting, and yeah, let's get going. My name is Mark Bernander. I'm the Natural Resource Manager with the City of San Diego's Parks and Recreation Department in our Open Space Division. And we're going to talk today about our 2020 annual report. And like Bethany said, we're in year 23 of a 50-year program. Okay, next slide. All right, so there are 2 habitat conservation plans that cover our city. And those 2 are the Vernal Pool HCP and the city's MSCP sub-area plan. And again, these initiated in 1997. Our MSCP is a 50-year program, and our Vernal Pool HCP is a 29-year program. They include about 206,000 acres, municipal and quarterstone lands all over the city. And again, 85 species, 46 plants, and 39 different animals. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Within the city's, within the city's within the city, there are about 57,000 acres, mostly contiguous area we call the multi-habitat planning area. 90% of that MHPA will make up our city's final MSCP preserve, which is required to be about 52,727 acres by the year 2047. I think that might be wrong, 2037, pardon me. That's a typo. All right, next slide. We can see here, we're in, like we said, we're in year 23. Per the blue part of this pie, we've met about 97% of our conservation goal, with just under 51,000 acres conserved or obligated, about 50,934 acres. And obligated lands make up about 15,000 acres of that blue area. And those consist of like watershed and cornerstone lands in our jurisdiction, but outside the municipal boundaries of the area of the city. Those areas include like Lake Hodges and San Pasqual valleys, the Otay Lakes, and San Vicente out in East County. And those areas are included in our cornerstone or conservation banking agreement. And including with those areas is Marone Valley, which is also in East County. And that was conserved through a phase 1 of the Cornerstone Bank mitigation agreement. And then here you can see in our orange sliver here, we only have about 2,000, little less than 2,000 acres to go, about 1,700 acres to go, or about 3% of conservation, 3% of this area to conserve in the next 26 years. So we're doing pretty good here. We also have about 3,000 acres conserved outside the MHPA. And these areas are important and they act as refuge and for biological diversity within the city. And it's mainly made up of land that's owned by open space at the time of our MSCP adoption. It also includes land that's been dedicated in fee title to the city from private owners, lands purchased by the city through various conservation monies, and private and open spaces gained through covenant easements or open space agreements with our mapping department. And so far, in this year, the planning department and our planning department and our park and rec open space division are currently working on standardizing the method of vernal pool reporting that we'll have to do. And we'll talk about those vernal pool issues later on this year or later on in another thing. So let's go to the next slide here. So in each year, we report our habitat gains and loss to our wildlife agency partners. Reports on development and mitigation are created, and the gain and loss locations are updated into a statewide GIS database known as HabitTrack, and that is run by CDFW, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. In 2020, our habitat losses were about 498 acres, 24 acres inside and 474 acres outside the MHPA. And we would like to make a note that that large loss is due to the attribute to the Sycamore landfill, which was finally reported in 2020. And our gains were approximately 280 acres, 257 acres inside the MHPA and 22 outside the MHPA. And typically, due to our incentive strategies within our sub-area plan, most gains are going to be inside the MHPA and most losses are going to be outside the MHPA, but it does vary from year to year. Okay, next slide. In 2020, we didn't actually have any acquisitions. We tried very hard. Also in 2020, over $123,000 was paid into the Habitat Acquisition Fund, or HAF as we call it here, from 4 different projects. And our current HAF balance for future acquisition is about $840,000. These monies are used to acquire sensitive MHPA lands and include lands in Del Mar Mesa, Otay Mesa, and East Elliott properties. Okay, next slide. This is a map of each year. We put together a map for our MHPA. And typically it was only available online through SandGIST, which is sponsored by Sandag. Early this year, our planning department launched its own web-based mapping tool to allow easy access for the general public. Layers that are available to them include the MHPA boundary, conservational status, and a regional map vegetation mapping. And you can search via the property's APN or address, or just by navigating the map to specific areas. And I think there's, as we go along, there's links being put into the chat for everyone if you want to go out there and check it out. Okay, next slide. All right, in January of 2018, our San Diego City Council adopted the Vernal Pool Habitat Conservation Plan and the Vernal Pool Management and Monitoring Plan, which covers 7 different species. That includes the Otay and San Diego mesa mints, spreading navarisha, San Diego button celery, or California orcuts grass, and Riverside and San Diego fairy shrimp. The map you're seeing here is our Vernal Pool interactive map, and that can be found on the city's webpage with a search for Vernal Pool HCP and then scrolling down from there. The green areas here represent existing baseline conserved areas of the MHPA and other conserved lands. The yellow areas represent about 275 acres that the vernal pool HCP added to the MHPA. And the darker green and yellow areas are the areas that will be 100% conserved, and the lighter green and yellow areas are areas that will be about 75% conserved or under our habitat conservation plans, and they are also conserved under environmental sensitive lands regulations, ESL regulations in the city. Okay, next slide. So as we produce a report every year, we manage currently about 40,000 acres of public open space, which would be not too much to look at without active management. And so our partners here at Park and Rec in our open space division, we also have landowners that include public utilities and environmental services, and our departments of real estate assets and airports, now called the Dream Department in San Diego. So in 2020, we took a good look. We had an opportunity to take a look at our reporting, and we reformatted our MSCP annual report into an online storybook for a more interactive user experience, which really details our management activities on the city's conserved lands. And I want to say a big thanks to my biologist, Sarah Allen, and her team of great interns and staff, and all of our park rangers who really took an active role in developing this report, because it is really now a much more user-friendly report. And we can, if we have time at the end, we can go down and take a look at that. But we can go to the next slide. And these are some of the example of how the storybook or story maps work on our page here. And this is a snapshot of our Los Penasquitos Ranger District, and includes an interactive map and tiles that kind of detailing the management activities that have occurred within each district. And then you can go directly to each district by clicking the tiles at the top, or if you choose, you can scroll down through the introduction to the very end, and you'll absorb all that great information through there, and it's really, really user friendly. And if you have an opportunity, please do stop by and take a look at it, because we put a lot of effort into it, and it really kind of portrays what we're all about here. So we can go to the next slide. And so as I mentioned here, our maintenance and management is performed by several different departments. Our public utilities department manages our cornerstone lands and the city reservoirs, and implements the canyon sewer cleaning program. And Park and Rec manages our MHPA lands through regional parks such as Mission Trails and Tecolote Canyon. And we also provide education to schools and to the public, although much of that didn't occur in 2020 due to the ongoing pandemic. The table at the bottom of this report is a quick summary of all the management actions that took place in 2020. And if you can see, we did quite a bit of work there, between picking up trash and all the different things, installing almost miles of fences, and many miles of trail repair, and about 199,000, almost 200,000 pounds of trash and litter that we removed from our parks and preserves this year. Okay, next slide. So some examples of management actions that occur in our parks. We have a vibrant native plant propagation group, especially in Mission Trails and Los Penasquitos and some other places that we have volunteers, and sometimes our actual rangers will take an active role in propagating native plants. We also really focus on invasive species control, and we also do specific management of endangered plants. One of those examples being Willowy monardella. Here you can see on our on the slide there. Okay, we can move to the next group. Some other, examples of things we've done are vernal pool maintenance. These are very sensitive species very sensitive ecosystems, and we have a vernal pool biologist who goes out and will maintain these with a small crew of very experienced contractors, or again, with our interns or rangers. We've implemented habitat restoration across the city. Some great examples of this are in Otay Valley Regional Park and Tecolote Canyon. Some of our rangers there have done a really excellent job of restoring native habitat in otherwise non-native ecosystems there. Of course, trail maintenance and access control always are big issues with us. So we implemented those projects pretty much citywide. Okay, next slide. One of the other things we're tasked with at the Open Space Division is development of our natural resource management plans. These fulfill our MSCP requirement to develop area-specific management directives and for the protection of those natural resources in the MHPA. There are numerous plans. They cover a variety of different areas, including the recently adopted Mission Trails Regional Park NRMP, seen there on the right in that little picture there. And there are several that are being prepared currently, and there's our various stages of development, but we hope they will be complete in the next calendar year. Tecolote Canyon, Otay Valley, and Crest Canyon, along with Pacific Highlands Ranch, Gonzales Canyon, which is yet to be, that one will probably likely be renamed somewhere along the line. Okay, next slide. All right, and so I want to say thank you very much to the county and all our partners, regional conservation partners, and everyone who has reached out to help with us, and all of the, we couldn't do it without the help from our partners all across the city, both private and public. So I really appreciate your help. And if you have a chance, there's links here to all of our different plans and things I talked about. Hopefully we can have those copied into the chat. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to talk to you about anything, and especially if it concerns conservation or preservation of our special place here in San Diego. With that, I will conclude my presentation, and I will hand it over to my colleague over at the City of Chula Vista, Dai Hong.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dai Huang, and I am with the City of Chula Vista Development Services Department. Next slide, please. I am going to talk about the Chula Vista MSCP Sub-Area Plan Overview 2020 report status and update on the management and monitoring of the Otay preserves. Next slide, please. The sub-area plan goal are to conserve cover species and their habitats such as Kino checker spot butterfly and coastal cactus grant, and to secure interconnected significant habitat core and linkage such as the Otay preserve area, also to provide long-term management and monitoring. Next slide, please. The plan was approved in February 2003, and the tech permit and implementation agreement were issued by the Wildlife Agency in January 2005. The sub-area plan provides conservation of 86 covered species, 99% hardline preserve, and approximately 9,243 acres conservation. The sub-area plan also identified development standard, mitigation, framework for management and monitoring, and long-term preserve management funding such as the Community Facility District Fund for management and monitoring. Next slide, please. 2020 conservation status, approximately 69% completed within Chula Vista sub-area plan, 85% gain outside Chula Vista, and overall contribution is approximately 76%. Next slide, please. So this map shows the area in the darker blue green is the conservation area within Chula Vista, and a lighter green is in the county area. Next slide, please. The Old Thailand Preserve include 11,000 plus acres and will be assembled and managed by the City of Chula Vista and the County of San Diego, also known as PALM, funding to the establishment of the Communities Facility District tax levy. Currently, approximately 4,358 acres under PALM management. Next slide, please. So the area, so in red is currently managed by PALM, and the area in green is the Hagline Preserve within this Chula Vista sub-area plan. Next slide, please. The 2020 marathon management activity include Kino Checker Spot Butterfly Survey, Coastal Cactus Grant, for the management, invasive species treatment, litter removal, access control, gate fan, and signage. Next slide, please. So I would like to introduce Anna Levitt with Recon Environmental, and she will talk more in depth about the Old Thailand Preserve management and marathon activity. Anna?
Okay, thanks, Di. And I want to say thank you to the county for hosting. My name is Anna Levitt. I work for Recon Environmental. I'm one of the preserve steward biologists for the city of Chula Vista, and I'll be talking about Otay Ranch Preserve today. Next slide. The Otay Ranch Preserve consists of 18 conveyed parcels. It is jointly managed by the city of Chula Vista and the county of San Diego, and they are called the Preserve Owner Manager, or the POM. You'll hear me use that term throughout the POM. Currently, there is, in 2020, there were 4,358 acres that had been conveyed into the preserve, and that's an increase of approximately 400 acres since 2019. Those 400 acres came in through the Proctor Valley extension parcels, which you can see are located northeast of Otay Reservoir. And at ultimate build out, the preserve will be 11,375 acres. And the preserve's guiding document is the Otay Ranch Resource Management Plan, Phase 1 and Phase 2, which was updated in 2018. Next slide. So we were all affected by COVID-19 in 2020. For the preserve, we had the statewide stay-at-home order that was placed, and immediately after that, we had a stop work order on the preserve from March 19th to May 29th. So a little over 2 months where we did not conduct any field work at all. But even with that 2 months of no field work, we managed to complete a lot of work on the ground after that was lifted. Next slide. So in 2020, we conducted focus surveys for Kino Checker Spot Butterfly at 3 separate parcel sets. We used a modified survey protocol where we proposed to survey up to 5 passes. And we also proposed that if we observed Kino, we would still continue surveying up to those 5 surveys. We completed 1 full survey pass at each of the 3 parcel sets, and that began on March 5th. After that first survey pass was completed, we had a week of unfavorable weather conditions where we couldn't go out in the field. And following that, we had the stop work order that was placed on March 19th. So by May 29th, when that stop work order was lifted, the end of the adult flight season for Kino had already happened. So that was the end of our surveys. Next slide. So even with only 1 survey pass, though, we gathered some pretty good data. 2020 was a good year for Kino. At the Salt Creek parcels, which are located in the southwest corner of Lower Otay Reservoir, we had 1 Kino that was observed on site. We hadn't observed Kino in that area since 2013, when we observed 4 incidental on Kino. And then the largest number that we have was from 2009. We had 6 Keno from that Salt Creek parcel set. At the San Ysidro parcels, which are located southeast of the reservoir, we had 14 Keno that were observed on site. And we had an additional 5 Keno that were observed off-site on U.S. Fish and Wildlife property and CDFW property that we observed when we were entering into our survey areas. So this was exciting to see with just one survey pass that we had 14 Keno on this parcel set. We hadn't observed Keno in this area again since 2013. And then our highest numbers that we had in this area were from 2009 when there were 29 individuals observed. So it seems like there was a good chance that if we had completed all 5 surveys that we might have been approaching those same numbers that we observed or that were observed in 2009. And then moving up to the ridge parcels, which are located northeast of the reservoir, we had 8 Keno that were observed within the parcel and then 2 that were observed off-site. And 2020 was the first year that we conducted protocol surveys in this area because the parcel was conveyed into the preserve in 2019. Next slide. 2020 was a busy year for weed treatment at Otay Ranch Preserve. We completed 78 treatment visits across 8 separate parcel sets. And so that's equivalent to 4 months of nonstop weeding. So that's pretty fantastic considering that we had over 2 months of no field work at all. So within that period of time, we were able to focus on a wide variety of non-native species that will contribute to the health of multiple sensitive species in the preserve. Next slide. So I'm going to go through just a couple highlights of areas that we treated weeds in. So this figure shows our millennia parcels, which are near the 125. The yellow parcels are Otay tar plant habitat. We treated non-native species in about 2.5 acres of Otay tar plant habitat and primarily non-native grasses. And then we also treated in those 2 green polygons, those are on Otay Mesa. And again, it was primarily non-native grasses and just about 6.5 acres that we treated. In the future, we want to try to seek funding to establish vernal pools in this area. So it's exciting to get started on treating weeds in this area. Next slide. The Salt Creek parcels, the orange polygons are cactus wren habitat. So we treated almost 44 acres in former Sandag Transnet project sites that have since been signed off. And then we treated an additional 1.65 acres of cactus wren habitat that was previously funded through the POM. In the southeast corner, those little blue polygons, those are vernal pools that we established in 2015. And we did quite a bit of hand weeding in that area and about 1/4 acre of vernal pool habitat. Throughout the Salt Creek parcels, we focused on removing stinkbort. We've been doing that for many years now, so it's we don't have many areas that are densely populated. It's pretty sparsely distributed, but we keep plugging away at that so that it doesn't get heavily established in this parcel set. And then 2020 was the first year that we were able to focus in on pampas grass, and that was primarily in the Salt Creek drainage area and little drainages that lead into Salt Creek drainage. Next slide. At Wolf Canyon, this was our first year where we focused in on Otay tar plant, which was in orange. And we also did some shrub thinning in cactus wren habitats within the canyon. And so this is exciting for us to be working in this location because it was a former recon restoration site that was managed by Mark Dodaro. And now it has come full circle back into the preserve. So we're getting to take care of the sensitive resources that occur in the canyon. Next slide. So as always, access control is one of our top priorities and main tasks that we deal with in the preserve. In 2020, we focused our energy in on trying to close down an illegal trail in the Humboldt Mountains, which is unofficially called the Horseshoe Mountain Trail. This trail crosses through City of San Diego property as well as the Palm property. And so this effort was collaborative between the City of San Diego and the Palm. We shared materials and discussed, kind of shared information on and ideas of how to creatively close this trail down. The City of Chula Vista also helped start the Otay Mesa access control meetings, which are held quarterly. And there's a variety of stakeholders that attend these quarterly meetings. The purpose of this is to shut down access points, key access points where trespassing is damaging sensitive resources or conserved lands. And then for our access control, we continue to use early detection, rapid response, which you've probably heard of from weed treatment. So in a similar fashion, when we observe a trail or an access issue that has occurred, we try to get in there as soon as we can to shut it down, decommission it so that it doesn't become popular and established with the public. Next slide. And then this table shows our numbers of what we did. So we installed 380 linear feet of wire and T-post fencing, and we repaired over 850 linear feet of wire T-post fencing, and that primarily happened in the Humboldt Mountains and the Salt Creek areas. Those parcels are where we have most of our access issues occur there. Next slide. And then some additional highlights. We prepared a 10-year summary report that compared past survey results. And we also began collaborating with USGS on a Golden Eagle camera trapping program that we are initiating this year in 2021. And we continue to contribute all of our data to the regional databases so that the other land managers have that information available for their use. Next slide. And with that, I'd like to say thank you and pass the talk over to Susan Nguyen with U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
All right. Yeah, I'm Susan Nguyen, and I work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And I'm just going to sort of summarize the preserve assembly that you've just heard about. So next slide. So when you put it all together, the different jurisdictions, and recall that there's a handful of jurisdictions that aren't permitted yet. So when you look at MSCP overall, we're at about 70% there as far as assembling the preserve. So this doesn't include, cities that don't have permits. This also doesn't include the obligated areas. So as an example, the city cornerstone lands that haven't come in yet in the later phases, like San Vicente, aren't included in these numbers. So if you included the obligated acres, we would be much, much closer. So again, we're about halfway through the permit, but we're, almost 3/4 of the way through the build out of the preserve. Next slide, please. So this just is another way of looking at the acreage. And, as you can see, we're just continuing to trend upward in our build out of the preserve. Right now we're at about 120,672 acres when you add up all the different jurisdictional lands, again, not including obligated lands. Next slide. So just as a little refresher, so the figure on the left is the preserve design, kind of the caricature that was in the umbrella document. So you can see in the green, the areas of concentrated core reserve, and then in orange are the linkages between those areas. And then the map on the right is showing the current condition. And so you can see, significant progress toward those core preserves. And in fact, even in some areas, we've gone well beyond the MSCP. So for instance, in the down Otay Mountain, anchoring us at the bottom there, and all the acquisition of Rancho Hamul and Hollenbeck and the state lands, has significantly expanded the preserve in those areas, where you can see that we're not really there yet. Is there's still some real critical linkages that we need to focus on. So getting from Hamul up to Sequan is one area, which is kind of the north part of linkage N. And then as we move to the north, again, the cornerstone lands aren't showing here, so it would look better around San Vicente if those cornerstone lands were green. But that core area 11, which is the Poway Central Poway, San Vicente North Poway area, is an area that we need to focus on, and then heading up toward San Pasqual Valley. And again, the city cornerstone lands aren't shown green on this map. If you zoom in, when you have this PowerPoint later at home, you can see the dark green areas are the areas that were added this year, and that were described in the city and county and Chula Vista's presentations. Next slide. So for the service, we had 2 small additions to the San Diego Wildlife Refuge. The very small one down in the middle there, 10 acres, was a donation property. It was mitigation for a property in the county. And then the TNC's, the Lions Peak area, there's a 123-acre area that was added to the refuge. And so as you can see, we're starting to fill in the holes in the refuge, and it's well on its way. And next slide. And so the other thing the service did this year was that the comprehensive conservation plan, the CCP for the San Diego Refuge, was finalized. And so this is the document that the service relies on for management guidance. And this was a long time coming in getting this published. We had, I think, just over 40,000 comments to respond to, a lot of interest related to hunting and trails and that sort of thing. Anyway, it's available on our website. There's the link. Our refuge manager, Dwayne, can be contacted if you have questions. And that is all the service is offering for this presentation. We were pretty shut down in 2020. So I am going to turn it over to Dave Mayer from the department.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Susan, for that daunting history. We've come an awful long ways in 23 years, and you don't realize it day by day, but these annual reports, they just verify how much progress we are making. Still ways to go. I absolutely appreciate the management and monitoring going on by our partners. That's, rubber hits the road. If we preserve land and we can't take care of the species, then we haven't done what we were intending at the beginning. So thank you for everybody's participation. Next slide, please. So this year, we're going to change a little bit. We've talked about a number of things that we've been focusing on out at Rancho Hamul in years past, from the burrowing owls and some other restoration programs. I'll quickly summarize some of our acquisitions, and then we're going to talk about our property at Cañada de San Vicente, which is along San Vicente Creek. It is within the MSCP, kind of northeast of San Vicente Reservoir. Next slide, please. So in 2020, we had just 2 acquisitions. They are shown in red if you look closely on the map on the right-hand side. At this point, or as of the end of 2020, the department owns 28,822 acres within the MSCP. We acquired approximately 258 acres in 2020. Next slide. Focusing in a little bit more, we have 2 properties referred to as Sloan Canyon Orums, approximately 172. The kind of lighter yellowish green with the cross hatching, that's the MSCP pre-approved mitigation area. So, sometimes the property comes available. Obviously, if you're going to buy the whole property, it may not all occur within the Palma, but you get what you can. It's usually good habitat, certainly meaningful for wildlife. The second property is Beneki, approximately 86 acres, and that is almost entirely, if not entirely, within the Palma. And the next slide, I just wanted to add, it's pretty much the same information, but I just wanted to provide a little bit more context. So you can see the Crest Ridge Ecological Reserve up at the far top left corner. And then you've got McGinty Mountain Ecological Reserve. You've got the Sycamore Peak Ecological Reserve. You know, it's nice that these are starting to kind of blend together. That means we're getting more contiguous habitat. Next slide. And this is a photograph of the Sloan Canyon. As you can see, fairly rugged. You know, it may not have been entirely, you know, under threat of development, but when you add it into the existing preserve system, certainly meaningful. Next slide, please. Before I turn this over to Han Sin, who will talk about some of the restoration projects at Cañada de San Vicente, I did want to mention that the San Diego County Water Authority, although they were not a member of the MSCP, they do have their own NCCP HCP. And part of their obligations when they got their permits, they provided a substantial endowment to the department to manage Cañada de San Vicente. They also historically have contributed to a number of the jurisdictions and the acquisitions that are now part of the reserve system. So they deserve their kudos. With that, I will give it to Han Sin.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, David. My name is Han Sin with California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and it's very exciting to hear all the great stuff the partners are doing, especially with given the challenges with COVID. So I'm going to talk about Cañada San Vicente Ecological Reserve in Vermont. It's a little over 5,000 acres. A little backdrop, you know, a lot of restoration practices have a kind of a sad story, and that's why restoration. So there's nationwide steady decline of native grasslands, over 70%, and the associated species that go with those native habitat types. And also with the grasslands nationwide, habitat loss, fragmentation, agriculture is a concern. And we also are concerned about the quality of grasslands that we have for ecosystem processes and species of greatest conservation need. And furthermore, we helped a graduate student, Heather Marshall, actually looked in San Diego for grasslands in San Diego for native bunch grasses, stipa, and has seen a steady decline as well. Next slide. So a little backdrop for Cañada San Vicente, we had a land management plan developed. And like Dave had mentioned, this is part of the sub-regional plan with the county, excuse me, with some help with the San Diego County Water Authority. So, and in the land management plan, it does identify grassland improvements and improving the habitat for various taxa and for fire management as well, which this grassland will do with irrigation as far as providing a green fire break. Next slide, please. So here you can see the map of Rancho Cañada, Cañada San Vicente Ecological Reserve. What's up right next to Barnett and Ramona. Initiated in this project initiated in 2018 with some SWIG funds, state wildlife grant funds. We had two major components. One is the grassland restoration itself, and we had some ponds on site. One in particular that was seasonal at best, and so we wanted to improve that to have wildlife access to water year-round, especially in these times of climate change, and develop some climate resiliency on the property and in regards to the MSCP. And with that, we did some veg habitat monitoring and wildlife monitoring, which Kyle will talk in a little bit. Next slide, please. All right, so this is a kind of a zoomed in area of this field that we're doing the restoration project. We're doing about approximately 20 acres. You'll see this northeast vineyard area to the north. That area is in the process of being irrigated now. We have staff filling up with the trenches right now. There was some partial delays due to procurement of items during COVID, and so that was to be expected. And so we are still in the process of doing the restoration efforts itself. We seeded the southern part, which is about 5 acres, early 2020, with stipa and some other native forbs in the area. the goal is to try to reach about 30% bare ground overall for easy access for various wildlife to forage and nest, like grasshopper sparrows, halibats like that open area. And so what we're hoping the goal is a bottom-up effect where we improve of everything from the plant community and improve things up the trophic level to even raptors. That's the goal. The goal, if we have more forests, more small mammals, and thus more prey availability for other mesic predators and predators like raptors. And so we are still going through the process of irrigating and seeding. We're planning to do so with a variety of treatments, whether it's direct planting, spreading seed, with a variety of methods of hand spreading seeds and using this ag sprayer with how would you say, this medium that the seeds will be in as well. Next slide. All right, quickly. So this is the plan I was talking about. We're looking at Bentland originally, but it would require like the ridiculous amount of truckloads, I think, in the over 200-300 truckloads. So we opted for this 40 mil liner. We got this done in 2020, late 2020, and we've been seeing some very good improvements. So I'd like to give a shout out to our land staff there too, Jason Price and the scientific aides that worked hard on this project. All this that we described has been a large team effort for sure. Next slide. All right, here's some photos of it, the pond with some water coming in. You can see some submergent vegetation come in, and we're hoping, we build a deal with calm. So we're hoping that this can be a refuge for tricolors and other amphibian species or whatnot. Next slide. And with that, I will hand this off to Kyle Rice, who's going to talk about some of the monitoring efforts there. And here's a picture of its full slew of species. Thank you.
Thanks, Hans. So yeah, as Hans mentioned, this project has a pretty extensive wildlife monitoring program associated with it. We've sort of covered the suite of taxonomic groups. We're doing bat monitoring using mist nets and acoustic recorders. We have a number of camera traps installed, not just around the pond, but within the restoration areas to try to ultimately detect some type of change in habitat use following the conclusion of the project and the establishment of the native grassland. We've also been doing annual small mammal trapping, some herp sampling, avian point counts, and vegetation assessments. And one of the neat things that we detected this year, and I know this is a 2020 presentation, but I jumped the gun a little bit and have some 2021 results included. Our resident herp expert was able to find this western black-headed snake under one of our cover boards as part of our herp sampling. So some pretty exciting stuff. Next slide, please. Another advantage of this project has been the fact that we've been able to direct some resources towards the management and maintenance of our grass farm out at Rancho Hamul Ecological Reserve. The purpose of this grass farm is to provide native bunch grass seed, other native grass seed, and ultimately, hopefully, forb seed for restoration projects. Over the years, we've been averaging around 400 to 500 plants at the farm, and this is mostly Stipa pulchra and Stipa lepida. We're planning to really ramp up the production here this year. We have about 1,500 plugs prepped that we're going to try to put in the ground once we get the first season rains. And then from there, future years, we really want to continue expanding the farm, both native grasses and, as I mentioned, additional forb species. Next slide, please. And then the last thing we want to touch on that we've completed, again, this is 2021, but you can imagine we did rare plant monitoring in 2020 as well. We had a number of occurrences that we needed to monitor this year, and we had to get some help from some folks at CBI, AECOM, Endangered Habitats Conservancy, and EDI. And without their help, I just don't think we would have been able to cover all these occurrences. So we really appreciate it. Big thank you to all those folks that helped out. The big things this year, notable observations were for the Brodea species, we really didn't see any floristic expression this year. We saw just very limited flowers, mostly vegetative. And for the Orcutt Brodea, it was pretty heavily impacted by herbivory. We've seen that in prior years, especially years where we don't have a ton of rainfall late in the season. And then for our Blumeria, we were a little bit surprised because the extent of the Blumeria out at the Rancho Humul area is, pretty much covered the entire max extent. This area burned a few years ago, and we had this huge explosion of the species. And luckily, we're still seeing that same extent level. The downside is we are starting to see some of the native or non-native grasses reestablished and non-native forbs reestablished. So I know John and his crew are actively treating as much as they can out there, but it's a little difficult given the proximity from the nearest roads. And then finally, I'll just mention our thorn mint populations at Hollenbeck still continue to look really good. We're seeing continued increases in number of plants, size of plants, and then we also still saw that we rediscovered a polygon on the north side of the road, and that's still doing well. And so our staff are still continuing to perform treatments over there, and we'll continue to manage those sites. Next slide, please. In terms of upcoming activities for the grassland restoration, our focus is really going to be on hitting the non-native grasses and forbs. With continued, whether it's mechanical or herbicide treatments. We're hoping to do a number of grow kill cycles over this next year once we get the irrigation finished. And then following that, our project timeline, we're anticipating seeding, winter of 2022, 2023. And then we'll continue our monitoring next year, and then we also anticipate monitoring post the conclusion of the grant, just because we recognize we're probably not going to see any real detectable change in wildlife use until the habitat is pretty established. So, and then lastly, we really want to focus on ramping up the SIPA production so we can have that seed available for future restoration projects, which we're hoping to complete. Next slide, please. And then in other activities, we'll plan to do our rare plant surveys during discussions with the folks from the zoo. It sounds like we're going to have some potential need for additional burrowing owl translocations to our Rancho Humul property. So we'll assist with those translocations and then the maintenance and monitoring that's associated with that. We'll have our tern and plover monitoring. We'll likely do some Hermes monitoring, Pinot monitoring at some of our properties. And then one of the big new items is there's some funding statewide for these limited term drought positions. And so we're hoping to do at least some baseline trend monitoring at our properties that have existing weather stations and start trying to look at the impacts of climate change on wildlife. So stay tuned for that. That should start getting ramped up hopefully next year and then the following year. Next slide. And we have this question slide, but it sounds like we're saving questions for the end. So I will instead say thank you all, and thank you to the county for hosting. Much appreciated. And I'll pass it over to Kim Smith at Sandag.
Okay, good morning, everyone. And it definitely is encouraging to see just all the progress that's been made, especially in the light of COVID. So this is the last presentation, I believe, and it's going to be a group effort. So today, Sandag and SDMMP will be presenting the regional management and monitoring highlights for 2020 to 2021. So I'll have to correct that slide. But for those of you that don't know me, my name is Kim Smith, and I'm the project manager for the environmental mitigation program here at Sandag. And excuse me, also with me today is Courtney Pesh. She's my new regional planner that's also assisting with everything EMP here at Sandag. And then we also have Dr. Chris Preston, Emily Perkins, and Sarah McCutcheon I think all of you guys know those faces from SDMMP. So Courtney and I are going to kick off the presentation and discuss the regional habitat conservation vision. And then again, we'll turn it over to SDMMP to tell you about the monitoring and managing highlights in 2020-21. So next slide, please. So over the past year, SANDAG has been working with members of our EMP working group and also regional partners on the development of what we're calling a regional habitat conservation vision. The purpose of this vision is to inform the 2021 regional plan and to also develop goals and objectives to be included in the plan in order to protect sensitive species, habitats, and resources in San Diego for future generations. And the draft regional habitat conservation vision can be found as Appendix AA of the 2021 draft regional plan. And we will actually put a link in the chat after we're done, if anyone's interested. So now I'm going to turn it over to Courtney, and she is going to kind of discuss what is the regional conservation vision all about. So next slide, and Courtney.
Thanks, Kim. Good morning, everybody. So when envisioning the 2021 regional plan, an ad hoc committee of the Environmental Mitigations Programs Working Group developed vision goals to further conservation efforts in the region. Outlined in the 2021 draft regional plan under Habitat Conservation Goals, Appendix AA, our resolve is to protect existing native species through strategic acquisition, management, and monitoring of critical habitat areas identified in regional habitat conservation plans. And then there's another animation. Perfect. Connect habitat areas through wildlife corridors and linkages, as well as connecting people to local species and natural habitats. And then one more click. Respect. The vision is to respect native species and their habitat, balance the demands for recreation opportunities with the desire for intact natural landscapes. Encourage community respect for natural lands through increased public outreach and education of San Diego's unique biodiversity. Next slide, please. So what does this vision propose any opportunities? SANDAG will establish a nature-based climate solution program that will promote natural infrastructure that uses or mimics natural processes to benefit people and wildlife. SANDAG will prioritize resilience and innovative solutions in transportation infrastructure, comprehensive multimodal corridor plans, and consistent regional planning and implementation of the sustainable communities strategy actions, emphasizing nature-based and technological climate solutions. In addition, proactive efforts through the environmental mitigation programs, such as the advanced mitigation and early acquisition of land, along with regional collaboration of land management and monitoring with SDMMP, have shown that together we can leverage our funding and collective knowledge to benefit the region. As part of the 2021 draft regional plan, SANDAG is charting a new vision for future mobility in the region. SANDAG envisions regional mobility hubs connected by high-frequency transit, which will provide greater mobility options throughout the region. Similarly, the regional habitat conservation efforts have envisioned hubs of protected natural lands connected by wildlife movement corridors that will help allow the system to adapt to the changing ecological conditions associated with climate change and be resilient to wildfire and emerging invasive species. There are also further opportunities to expand upon ongoing efforts to assess the amount of carbon storage and sequestration potential of open space lands and the co-benefits from preserved open space, land management, and restoration activities. Next slide, please. And now I'm throwing it back over to Kim.
So Courtney just kind of outlined all the opportunities that we outlined in the regional habitat conservation vision. And I'm really happy to be here today to let you know that in order to meet the region's habitat conservation goals as outlined in the vision, the draft 2021 regional plan now identifies approximately $3 billion. Yes, I did say $3 billion in funding for those habitat related efforts. So this includes the funding for our enhanced habitat conservation management and monitoring programs. It includes a nature-based climate solutions program that Courtney just mentioned that will promote both habitat conservation restoration in support of carbon sequestration, and funding for land acquisition and restoration for mitigation for our regional transportation projects. So what does that look like, and what are our next steps to implement this vision? So next slide, please. Perfect. So first, the Sandag board will need to adopt the 2021 draft regional plan. This item, as well as the EIR for the plan, will be brought before the board on December 10th. And so I really encourage everyone to, if you get a chance, to tune into that meeting, because it should be definitely a long meeting, but hopefully with a good outcome. Second, once this plan is adopted, again, how do we implement this vision? And what this looks like, I think right now, we have some idea, but we need to engage a larger group. So beginning in January in the new year, we're going to be getting together those folks, some of you, including some of you that presented today, to begin those discussions. So I will now, next slide, please. And now I'm going to turn it right back over to Courtney.
Thanks, Kim. It's like we're playing tennis right now. So I wanted to, as many of you know, work performed under the Environmental Mitigation Program is implemented through consultant contracts in the Land Management Grant Program. So I wanted to give a reminder that the Environmental Mitigation Land Management Grant Program 10th cycle of funding was released on October 25th, and the Board of Directors has allocated $2.4 million for the 10th cycle of grants. For this cycle, we will be utilizing a new software program called BidNet. In order to register, submit, and receive notifications for the Land Management Grants 10th cycle, you must be registered through BidNet. Applications and questions must be submitted via BidNet Direct, and questions are due no later than January 17th, 2022, and applications are due by January 31st. More details on the call and the eligibility, submittal, and evaluation criteria can be found on Sandag's website. And if you have any questions, please reach out to Kim or I, and our email addresses are located on the bottom of the screen. Thank you. And I will now be turning it over to Chris to finish off the presentation.
Thank you, Courtney. Today I will be presenting. Sarah and Emily weren't able to do it today, so I'll just take the mantle for the San Diego Management and Monitoring Program. And I have to say I'm a year ahead of everybody else. I'm presenting results for 2021, so sorry about that. I guess I didn't get the right memo. Okay, next, please. So as most of you know, we have a management and monitoring strategic plan, which we call the MSP roadmap, and it has monitoring and management goals and objectives for 111 species, 11 vegetation communities, and 13 threats. Now, this was for the 2017 to 2021 planning cycle. We are now in the process of updating for the 2022 through 2026 planning cycle with additional species. And so those objectives are still being reviewed and will be put into the plan, into what we call tracker, where you can go and look at the goals and objectives. That will be happening early next year. Next, please. So the plan, the MSP roadmap, drives all of our monitoring and management activities. And in 2021, we were very busy through a contract with AECOM and Conservation Biology Institute as a subcontractor. They worked on our rare plant management program. And so we completed management and seed plan chapters for 3 species. So we're up to 7 species. You can go to our web portal and go for under projects management of rare plants, and you can find our management plans and our seed collection and conservation banking plans. We conducted our regional inspect and manage monitoring. This is done through the contributions of many landowners and managers, as was represented by it was mentioned with CDFW, City of San Diego, and County. So everybody contributes to this, and we monitor these plants across the region. And in 2021, there were 17 species monitored. We also conducted, through the contract with AECOM and CBI, we conducted discovery surveys for 3 plant species. So this is where we went out and looked for plants to try to identify new populations. And then we did a willowy monardella habitat and hydrological evaluation. So we're developing a ranking system to look at where we might further augment and manage populations of willowy monardella. Next, please. Busy with invertebrates, lots of butterfly work. As most of you have been hearing, butterflies and pollinators in general are having a difficult time lately with the climate change and other factors. So we've been doing annual Hermes copper surveys. That's done by Dan Marshallek from the University of Missouri. And he also did Harbison Dunskipper surveys for us in 2021. And we're working on a plan of action for 2022 to try to find more populations and come up with next steps for Hermes copper. Keno Checker Spot, that's really a partner effort by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Spring Strom from formerly Conservation Biology Institute and the San Diego Zoo pollinator efforts, where they rear captive rear larvae. And this has been a very successful program. I encourage you to reach out, and I imagine there's something about this on the Fish and Wildlife Service site. It's a great effort where translocations have been going on for several years in the San Diego National Wildlife Refuge. And then finally, we are working on a pollinator monitoring plan that will tie into our veg monitoring. That's being spearheaded by Dan Marshallek and Michael Wall from San Diego Natural History Museum. Herps, USGS has continued to coordinate regional monitoring. Arroyo toad is not doing so well because of the extensive drought. And so that is a species that we're really focusing annual monitoring on at this point. USGS has been doing monitoring and management of southwestern pond turtles with several populations established the focus is to increase recruitment of young turtles into the breeding population. So there's been a substantial effort there. And then USGS also did a Western Spadefoot toad survey. They're looking at habitat management units for potential listing or to preclude listing. Next, please. Lots of bird work. Again, this was primarily USGS. Cactus Friends we finished up a 5-year study that is now under and was analyzed in the last year, and the results will be coming out in reports in this next year. Golden Eagle, again, analyses were conducted, and we're going to be developing a management and monitoring plan. Same with Cactus Wren in 2022. Southwestern willow flycatcher continue to do surveys and analyzing the breeding data that will be coming out in a report next year. And burrowing owl, this is a partners effort spearheaded by the San Diego Zoo Global, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has been coordinating this and with CDFW. And there's many partners, and I have to say this is a great project. A lot's being done. There's been captive rearing, establishing new nodes, and managing nodes. Tricolored blackbird, AECOM conducted the surveys for us this year and assessed habitat. And this is one species that's moving up into our priority for really doing some work with, because this is a species that's not doing well throughout its range in California and even into Baja California. So we surveyed and assessed breeding habitat, and the goal would be to really restore breeding habitat in areas with foraging habitat. And that's really crucial. One of the problems for the tricolored blackbird is there's not a lot of grassland foraging habitat available. And that grassland habitat has to be fairly short grass. It can't be a lot of tall invasive non-native grasses. So that requires usually grazing. Northern Harrier, AECOM also surveyed and assessed breeding habitat and found several breeding pairs in coastal San Diego County, and this species is also not very prevalent anymore in our study area. Next, please. We have been working on a Pallet and Townsend's big-eared bat management plan. USGS has been working on this, And we have a draft plan with, we will be finalizing that later in 2022. Continuing to survey for badgers. This is a very elusive species, and we run the hotline for detections, and that's been a great way for people to submit badger observations, and then they get followed up on. And then mountain lion, and that was a badger was a USGS project. Mountain lion, UC Davis, Winston Vickers is continuing work on developing monitoring methods, both here and in the Santa Ana range. And so we're collaborating with that, looking at potential to use camera traps and artificial intelligence software to identify individuals, as well as ways to gather genetic samples. Then that will wrap into a long-term monitoring plan over the next couple of years. And then Winston is also continuing to look at deterrence to livestock depredation by mountain lions to protect them from being killed by depredation permits when they prey upon goats or sheep or other livestock. Next, please. We've been doing a lot of work on vegetation ecological integrity modeling using LiDAR and remote imagery. We're looking at coastal sage scrub and chaparral as the percent of shrub cover versus non-native annual grasses. And for oak, woodland, and riparian, we're looking at the percent of dead trees. That's due to threats for the oak, woodland, and riparian is invasive beetles have really been hitting in a conjunction with drought and fungal pathogens. For threats, we've been managing invasive plants over the years. We have Jason Giesau coordinates that and does it in level 1 and 3 plants in our plant invasive plant strategic plan, using county ag as the contractor. We've put some money into stink net control and started that this year. We got delayed because of COVID and other reasons. And we're doing retreatments of Arundodonax in some areas in North County. And we're also conducting a grazing study. UC Berkeley is the team on that with a number of collaborators on Rancho Hamul and Hollenbach. We've been working on managing invasive animals by looking at an evaluation of beavers and the potential they have for impacting habitat of native species and their status within San Diego County. So we've contracted with UC Davis to do a study that's coming to completion on shot hole borer and fusarium fungi. It's a symbiosis, and it's causing extensive dieback of riparian vegetation. And so they've developed some control methods, and that should be something really interesting for land managers. They will hold some workshops at the end and really give some ideas on how to manage that particular invasive beetle and fungal pathogen. Wildfire, USGS is taking the lead in developing a resource advisor program that will be available to local jurisdictions if they're interested in participating. And we will also be reaching out next year. We've started a resource avoidance area mapping that would be used by the wildfire agencies. And finally, hydrological monitoring this last year was done with measuring the amount of moisture in streams using loggers. Next, please. And what SDMMP has been really busy on this year is a State of the Reserve report. This is a regional preserve report, and that will be coming out sometime early next year, along with a web portal. So sometime around March, we'll have this metrics dashboard that will be interactive, and it will focus in on indicators with that represent some aspect of the preserve system. And then there will be multiple metrics per indicator that you can go into and explore. And we'll also have our report available for download, but we really see the future as being more of this interactive, dynamic web portal. And that concludes my presentation. Next. I think that's it. Oh, there. Thank you very much. And I will turn it over to Bethany in case there are any questions that we can answer. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. So we did have, it's now our question and answer portion of the workshop. So if you do have a question, just click on the Q&A icon on your toolbar or raise your hand and we will unmute you. We had one question that was already answered by Susan Wynn. Thank you, Susan. Is there a consistent regional focus on monitoring critically invasive species such as the rhododendron and Washingtonian robusta? Or is all invasive survey work conducted on a project basis focused on restoration sites and rare plant population management? And Susan answered that the San Diego does have a comprehensive invasive species program. Information can be found on the SDMMP portal, and we can actually put that portal link in the chat as well. Another question was, will the recording of this presentation be made available? The answer is yes. We will be posting it within a few days onto the DPR webpage for the public meetings at sdparks.org/public meetings, and we can also put that link in the chat as well. We had one other question pop up for the county. What kind of efforts are being planned and or implemented to address monarch in your restoration areas? So we actually, for Dictionary Hill Preserve, we originally were just going to do coastal cactus wren and I believe Kino restoration, but because we got input from stakeholders and other interested parties, we actually expanded the restoration efforts to explicitly include monarch. So we're actually going to be including 25 pounds of seed mix for host and nectar plants on Dictionary Hill Preserve for the restoration project that's happening. And we will be keeping an eye out for other restoration areas that monarch host plant and nectar plant seed mix would be appropriate. And do we have any other? I'm not seeing any raised hands. Is there anyone else with any other questions? The question is actually for anyone so appreciate the information, particularly from the City of Chula Vista on efforts to address unauthorized access. For anyone, please speak to efforts to reduce recreation-related negative indirect effects on trails or recreation on wildlife. For SDMMP, any more research planned to further the study, to further study the indirect effects of trails and recreation on wildlife? Would anyone on the panel like to take this question? And SDMMP, would you also like to take this question?
I can start. We are looking at a camera network using among our partners. A number of the partners are actively monitoring using cameras. And so we at some point would like to get that integrated into a network where we could look across the preserve system. Right now, we do not have a lot of human activity projects scheduled. And that is because we're focusing right now more on the invasive species and with limited resources. But we do have a program that is available, the enforcement program, that if any jurisdiction wanted to come forward and propose a project, there is funding in there to look at the impacts of human recreation and what can be done through enforcement. So it's tied together. And so far, the city of Carlsbad has made use of that. That previously we had some work done in the South County, and Kim could probably speak more to that particular program, but that is a way that we have done some previous human use monitoring on Del Mar Mesa. So right now, though, we don't have a lot of specific management recommendations for that.
Yeah, and I could just speak really quickly. We did have, yeah, City of San Diego did a pilot project on enforcement that we provided funds for. Carlsbad did a great pilot program with the Rangers on enforcement where we did get information out of that. But we do have funds available. So if any jurisdictions are interested, I know at one point the City of Chula Vista did reach out. We're working with Mark over at City of San Diego, specifically on Del Mar Mesa Preserve, to use a portion of those funds. So.
I can also jump in and help answer that question from the county's perspective. And I do appreciate Chris and Kim reminding us about that funding source. It's something we have talked with Sandag about. Using funding for this opportunity, but it is an area where the county is always looking to ensure that we balance that recreation and preservation so that we are not impacting our preserve. And so, you know, we are working continuously with our operations, our ranger staff, which we have a pretty extensive team of ranger staff, over 100 different boots on the ground that are out there in our different preserves, helping to ensure that we're not having impact to the preserve. But when it does happen, Beth and the other planners and biologists on my team are working closely with the ops team to do restoration, and we do a lot of different techniques where it could go from signage to ranger patrols to even putting up bollards, and in some cases, you know, cactus plants and things like that to deter people from going off trail and staying only in the public access areas. We also do have preserves that are completely closed down. And I know when Chula Vista, you know, they gave a great presentation about the palm. We do work closely with Chula Vista on that because that is a closed area and we do continue to have issues. So we constantly working to try to handle that and adapt our methodology. So we always appreciate any advice and tools to continue to address this this issue that has come up in some areas. Thank you.
And
This is Mark. I just wanted to just reiterate the same with Deb and Bethany and everybody has presented. The City of San Diego, City of San Diego has also been very, very cognizant of these issues. And so we're working with our ranger districts to close down unauthorized access as we find them. It's a lot like a cat and mouse game in some areas. So we close down areas, they'll open someone will open up another area. So we try to stay a step ahead. It's not always possible, but we certainly have noticed an increase of those unauthorized users in our preserves over the last couple of years. So it's something that's risen to the top of our priority list to eliminate those. We've had a situation with unauthorized balloon access in some of our preserves, and we've worked really hard and altered ranger schedules and put in new fencing and tried to reach out to those programs as well to eliminate those encroachments. So it's something we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and we're very cognizant of it. And I really appreciate the partners we have here and the funding opportunities that are available to help with that. So thank you again for all the work that everybody else does, and we'll continue to monitor those situations and try to keep our preserves and parks safe.
Yeah, and I think that it's really important to mention that the land managers are doing a really great job with this enforcement and monitoring of recreation use. One thing I forgot to mention is that some of our monitoring programs take into account recreation impacts. And so, for instance, for golden eagles, we've developed some impact analysis of human use on golden eagles behavior, their foraging and their nesting. And then also, like when we do our rare plant monitoring, we have threats measured, and one of those is human trampling, encroachment on the population, and so on. So we do take into account, but we haven't tackled recreation head on. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thanks, Chris. All right. The next question is, has any of the monitoring observed impacts on sensitive species from the feral cat release programs or the working cats program? Would any of our panelists like to take this answer? Chris, did you unmute on purpose?
I can take a stab
Thank
at it.
you. Okay.
I just noticed in the yesterday in the news that they are thinking of releasing cats into rural areas to be, I guess it's this working cats program. Had not ever heard of that before. And that's a real concern for birds and lizards and small mammals and so on. We have not specifically monitored cats. Mostly cats are a factor at the edge of preserves and in urban areas. We haven't, most of our monitoring is, in these larger preserve areas where we seldom see cats. They just don't go that far into the preserves. But in our canyon areas, they're probably a huge impact, not even just the feral cats, which is a huge issue, but even just pets. And that has not been something that we have specifically monitored. And, it's something to consider going forward as a threat that we would, I'm not quite sure how we would monitor that, given the extensive urban canyons and how expensive that would be. But it's possible, maybe working with the San Diego Natural History Museum and their program to monitor urban canyons, as well as the canyoneers and others, that we could set up some kind of methodology to look at that.
Thank you, Chris. So Chris, I think this is coming right back at you. Would the SDMMP portal be the place for people to report invasive plant locations that they observe? Yes,
we would welcome that. We are going to be focusing on creating a EDRR database for invasive plants in the next year and a half. And that would be something that could be entered through iNaturalist or other types of apps. And then that data would be harvested by us and put into a database that could be used for management. But if you want to reach out to me, if you have some invasive plant locations, we're interested in that. We right now are focusing on the highest level ones, the ones that we have a potential to eradicate or want to really control so they don't become widespread. And so any new species that we're unaware of in the county would be very helpful. So you're welcome to contact me. Just go to the SDMMP webs portal and you can go to About Us and find my contact information. Thank you.
We also had a helpful member of the public say that they can use the iNaturalist project as well.
Yes.
To report the invasive plant species. And that is something that we would also highly encourage that as well. They do an excellent job. We had one more question, it looked like, and panelists, please keep me honest. I am not seeing anyone with their hand raised, but are you seeing any participants with their hand raised? I don't want to miss anybody. So we have a question of how has the conservation of the deciduous Dudleya species progressed this last year? And Mark, it looks like you are maybe typing an answer. Do you just want to turn on your mic?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. I started to type it and I was like, well, I can just tell you. Well, the deciduous, the two different Dudleyas that we monitor, Dudleya variegata and Dudleya brevifolia, we have the data in our rare plant program monitoring report that we added into the link for 2020. Anecdotally, Dudleya variegata, the variegated Dudleya, did better this year than it has in previous years. In our, I would say, in our last 2021 monitoring, I can't I think in 2020, it was actually was not as prevalent as it had been in previous years. 2021 was actually more prevalent than it had been in previous years. Dudley brevifolia has had a decline for the last couple years after we had a really good year in 2019. The last 2 years have declined a little bit, and that's due to timings of rain and the drought there. But our populations are still in the same places, and we continue to monitor them and really actively engage canyon residents in some of those areas that are local canyons, and our ranger program, and as well as a lot of volunteer effort, keeping their eyes on those populations and encroachments into those habitats. But yeah, they're very dependent on rain, and hopefully we'll have a decent rain year this year, and we'll have better news to report in the following years.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. If we do not have any other, we had a comment that, we have another question about deadly poaching being a problem. Mark, have you had poaching of Deadlia on your properties?
We haven't observed any of it. That's not to say it hasn't happened, especially with the more common Deadlia species. That is something that I've certainly taken note of, and the CDFW's efforts to limit those poaching in Northern California certainly took a lot of people. Their sting operation and things they did to capture those poachers certainly brightened our eyes as to the potential for this. So we keep an eye on it, but it hasn't been a widespread issue that we've noticed as of yet. But it's certainly something that we've kept our eyes on and making sure that we don't see that those plants pop up for sale on like local social media websites or whatever. I monitor some of our gardening groups and things like that just to make sure that everybody's on the straight and narrow there. So
right.
Yeah.
At the regional scale, we have not noticed any poaching of the sensitive Deadlia species that we're monitoring. And next year we'll be doing all of the Deadlia species that we monitor will be a focus. But we do not post on our current viewer any of the Deadlia locations. So that is all restricted information because of that poaching threat.
And that's the same with the county. We don't like to give people a map to where they can get sensitive resources. There was a question of, do you think people are using iNaturalist to find these locations of rare Deadlia? And I don't know if we have an answer to that question. We can ask Mark. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think for the populations that I see, they typically mask them, the typical location. But I think for sensitive species, if people are seeing those, I can't speak for the gnat, but I do know that they have masked some of those areas, certainly.
And we just got a comment that iNaturalist obscures the location of sensitive species. So that answers that.
So
great. I don't believe we did get a comment about Deadlia. Seems to fluctuate with rainfall, and last year was a moderate population size. So we agree.
That's Sarah Allen, our botanist, chiming in there. So
Sarah,
thank you, Sarah.
You have an M in front of it, so it turned into Sarah Mallon. Sorry, Sarah. So Sarah's with the city of San Diego.
Yeah.
So Sarah, you're doing an awesome job of commenting. Thank you. All right, so I think that might answer all of our questions, unless I'm ignoring someone totally on accident about their raised hands. But we want to thank you. The county wants to thank you. Our partners want to thank you for participating in the workshop, and we look forward to next year's workshop and talking about the 2021 2021 efforts. So thank you so much. We hope you have a great day and stay safe.